Are you trying to avoid a C-section? Then you need to know about the scariest words that you could possibly hear in labor. Failure to progress. On the outside, this term seems innocent enough. I mean, after all, sometimes birth just doesn't go the way we want, right? However, the problem is that failure to progress isn't all it seems. In fact, this term might as well be called failure to wait. Hi, my name is Carly Bonderud, and this is the Cesarean Trap series where I go deep into everything that you need to know to avoid a C-section that could otherwise have been prevented. Now, I'm not saying that every single C-section was unnecessary because, of course, there are times, about 10 to 15% of the time, where a C-section is the appropriate response to save lives. However, the way that our birth culture and medical system has basically taken over the birth space and appropriated the term of natural birth means that a lot of C-sections could have been prevented if only moms knew about these cesarean traps. And in this series, I'm going to go deep into those cesarean traps. So if this is your first video and you've never heard of me, then continue to watch because I'm going to tell you a little bit about the cesarean traps, how you can learn more about that, what this series is really about, because this is a deep dive masterclass. Every single one of these classes builds on another one. So I'm going to be referencing things within this class from other previous master classes, and I'm also going to be telling you about natural birth traps and essential tips. So if you are new to me, then let me just tell you, my name is Carly Bonderud, and I'm a childbirth educator, a coach, and the author of Your Empowered Birth, which is that little blue book behind me. I have one main focus, and that is helping you to plan and get your empowered birth, no matter what that actually ends up looking like. So the thing is that a C-section needs to be a last resort, not a first response. And unfortunately, a lot of times moms fall into the cesarean trap where they think that they were planning a natural birth only to end up having a C-section. And then they conclude, well, I guess my body just doesn't go into labor or I fail to progress. In this particular masterclass, I'm going to be addressing cesarean trap number 7, which is failure to progress. This is different from not dilating because there's a difference between failure to progress in labor and failure to go into labor by a certain arbitrary timeline. They are very similar, and at the same time, there's a little bit more urgency when you are already in labor and you're on the clock. So if you watch this video to the end, you're going to get the complete overview of not only what this trap is, how it shows up, how to spot it, why a lot of moms don't see this trap coming, and how to also apply the empowered birth method so that this trap is less likely to derail your natural birth and lead to an unnecessary C-section that you then later, when you're planning a VBAC, realize could have been avoided in the first place, meaning that you wouldn't have to fight the uphill battle that a lot of moms have to fight when they are trying to get a VBAC. Because if you are trying to avoid a C-section as a VBAC mom, this is a different path than if you're trying to avoid it as a first-time mom. Now, if you want to know the full overview of the mistakes that you could be making as a first-time mom, a seasoned mom, and a VBAC mom, then I suggest you go to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide, because that is going to give you the complete overview of what you really need to know. We also have a concept of true natural birth. This is also basically physiological birth. However, a lot of moms don't know what that term is. And it, again, gets taken over by the birth community to say, well, all births are technically physiological. No, they're not. If you are having your birth managed and controlled and you are being told to go against your instincts, to do something that doesn't feel right to you, your body is very smart and it's going to shut down. In fact, as you're going to find out in this masterclass, failure to progress is often a response to the outside and the conditions that are leading to moms being afraid. They don't feel safe to birth. And the rigid control of the medical system is actually causing this failure to progress to happen. So if you are new to me again and you want to know more about the cesarean traps, then I encourage you to watch the first video within this series. So this is season 3 of the Empowered Birth series, where I go deep into everything you need to know to plan and get your empowered true natural birth. You go into the playlist on my YouTube channel and you find the Empowered Birth series, Cesarean Traps. The first video in that series is going to give you the overview of what a cesarean trap is. It's also going to go deeper into how to apply the Empowered Birth method and first steps that you may want to take if your goal is to avoid a C-section. So I highly suggest you check out that video. The master classes are basically meant to be binge watched, as you are going to just go through and find what is most relevant to you. You can also follow the rule of 3, and that means watch the videos 3 times and you get the overview, you get the aha moments, and finally you also will be able to implement the strategies that I give you within each of these videos. Think of this as if you were taking a course on how to avoid a C-section, and you're piecing the information together yourself. I have 3 paths. I will tell you more about that deeper into this video. And again, you can check out more by going to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide. So what are we going to be covering in this class? Okay, well, first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about the cesarean trap failure to progress. Then I'm going to also tell you how moms get tricked. I'm going to share with you why it's so hard to spot that trap, and I'm going to share stories about how to avoid that trap. I basically teach and I tell through story at the same time. I'm also going to tell you about how to apply the Empowered Birth method, not just for avoiding this one cesarean trap, but to make sure that you are essentially not going to fall into any other traps, because it's not just avoiding a C-section. Failure to progress can also lead to other natural birth traps that I have already gone into in the previous season, season 2, natural birth traps. So you may want to check out those videos as well. I will also be telling you about additional resources that you're going to want to check out outside of the Empowered Birth community. So these are usually books or articles that you may want to check out. Finally, to get the most out of this masterclass, check the description of this video. If there happens to be a transcript already there, then you're going to want to check that out, because you can download that transcript. And then what you can do is you can follow the links. I'm not talking about the AI transcripts that automatically generates on YouTube. You can use that if you don't have the PDF transcript. However, if the PDF transcript is available, that is going to give you a lot more value, because I have embedded links. I've allowed you to basically skim the headlines, skim the most relevant pieces, so you don't have to sit there and read the whole thing. The way that these classes are structured is also choose your own adventure. So if you are new to me, then you're getting the overview of how this works. If you have already followed the Empowered Birth method for a while and you kind of know how it goes, then checking the blue headlines at the bottom of the screen is going to tell you what is next in the overview. And of course, the light blue headlines are also telling you about the links to get to certain parts of the Empowered Birth method in our entry levels of either getting on the newsletter, getting our Empowered Birth Toolkit, which is an ever-evolving resource, getting into our program, Your Empowered Birth Academy, checking out our free workshop that we have, Your Empowered Birth Workshop, and anything else that is relevant to this particular masterclass. Okay, so now you kind of know what we're going to have in the video. And of course, at the end, I also do a recap. I add additional insights. I'm going to tell you about those 3 paths to empowered birth. And then we sign off. I tell you about what's coming up next in the series. And all I ask again is, if you find value in this video, to please like, share, subscribe to the channel, comment, pay it forward, pass this on. If you have urgent questions, email the team, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com, because I do read every single comment that comes in on the videos. I do respond to the ones that I feel called to respond to. Oftentimes, if you're sending me love and light and you are also asking questions and you're not trying to pick a fight, I mean, it's birth. So there's a polarization happening. You know what happens in mom groups. I may not respond to those ones, or I may respond intentionally. Never ever fear when people come up and they start tearing things down. You still have a voice here at Empowering Moms, and I am here to protect you. This is a safe space, okay? So I am going to do my best to impart wisdom where I can, and I leave the rest. If somebody needs to be removed from the community, I will absolutely block them if that needs to happen. And at the same time, I believe that when you gatekeep too much information, or you don't show the other side, you just delete the comments, that doesn't give you the insight into the other side. So there is a method to the way that I run my communities. There is a way of how I run my entire business. And I really want you to know you are safe here. Whether you are birthing a baby, birthing a business, birthing a creative project, a movement, or a new version of yourself, Empowering Moms is here to help you on your path to empowerment, okay? So that's pretty much what I have for the intro. Now we're going to dive into the cesarean trap itself, failure to progress. Okay, so what does this trap look like from the outside? Because, you see this a lot in the mom groups, and you see this a lot on TV and in movies. You even can see it inside of some popular books. So in one of them, the idea is that the mom is in labor. She's been in labor for 12 hours. And they're like, we've been at this for a while and we need to start Pitocin. Or we've been at this for a while. We need to break your waters. We've been at this a while. We need to just call it a C-section. Now, depending on how your labor started, failure to progress can be either because your baby isn't ready yet. So if you were induced, you're more likely to have failure to progress because your body just isn't responding. Your body is not ready. Your baby is not ready. So you're having these contractions one on top of the other, but they're not doing anything. They're just causing problems. It's like smacking a ketchup bottle and the ketchup is not coming out. So recognizing that failure to progress can be because of induction. The other side of it is that you were having an established labor. It was going fine. And then you got to the hospital or you called the midwife to the house. The environment has changed. And because the environment has changed, now your contractions are spacing out again, or your contractions are not causing your cervix to dilate, or they're looking at the clock and they're like, you've been in labor for X number of hours. Why isn't anything happening? Why hasn't your cervix dilated? I've had this experience myself where I had been in labor for about 24 hours. And I got up to 6 centimeters. And the midwife was very adamant. She's like, you need to dilate at least 1 centimeter per hour. And against my better judgment, I agreed to another cervix check. My labor shut down after that. So I was technically failure to progress. However, I sent the midwife home and then I went back into labor on my own. And I wasn't paying attention at that point to the clock. So there's a lot of reasons why failure to progress actually happens and why a lot of doulas and midwives will declare it failure to wait. You have to understand the medical system is a business. They are looking to fill beds and empty beds. And even if you are having a home birth and you call the midwife to the house, your midwife is still needing to check in at the hospital if they are in the system. If they're not in the system, this is a different story, of course. However, if you have a registered midwife and they are integrated with the hospital, what happens when you go into labor is they instantly go and check in with the hospital. They call in and they say a labor is taking place now. The home birth is taking place. And then that still puts you on the clock. Now, I've done other videos about this, about cervical dilation. I talked about vaginal exams, how that's a natural birth trap. I've talked about Pitocin use and how that's a natural birth trap. I've talked about how trying to get things going and speed things up also can screw up your labor process. I've talked about how your flow can be interrupted. So go and check out the Essential Tips series and the Natural Birth Trap series to get more of an overview. Inside of my program, Your Empowered Birth Workshop, I also have Module 2, which goes more into physiological birth from an overview standpoint. And then finally, I would also suggest you learn everything you can about physiological birth. This is different from typical natural birth education with the labor stages and dilation, because our bodies are not machines. So understanding why is it that moms fall into these traps? Well, because again, our society has based this off of the idea that you have to dilate a certain number of centimeters, you need to progress at a certain level, you need to have your contractions in a certain pattern, and if it's not in that pattern, well, then you're not able to labor effectively. And that's when the system basically pushes you in the direction of Pitocin, or they break your waters, or they tell you, you know, this baby's not coming out. We should probably just do a C-section. Baby's probably too big. And the truth is that no, oftentimes your body just needed more time. Oftentimes you just needed more safety. And oftentimes you just needed them to just like leave you alone. Is essentially. Labor is not a spectator sport. And unfortunately, our birth culture and medical system has made it a spectator sport. So a lot of times when moms tell me I failed to progress in labor and that's why I got my C-section, I'm looking at it and it's like, they didn't let you eat or drink in labor. Go check out one of my other videos in the Natural Birth Trap series about not eating and drinking in labor. I'm also going to go into this deeper inside of the Cesarean Trap series. That is one of our traps. And then in addition to that, it's like, well, you were stuck in the bed. If you're stuck in the bed, you're not able to move around, which means baby can get stuck. And it also means that your body is not able to get into positions that help you feel comfortable. And then if you feel tensed up and afraid, your body is going to shut down the labor process. A really good reference for this is Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage by Rachel Reed. And the reason that I love this book so much is because it goes into physiological birth and tells you all of the different steps. It also tells you about the rites of protection, which is essentially what people did at home versus the medical rights of protection, which is how the medical system can derail the physiological process. Now, I'm not saying that technology and medicine isn't important, that it doesn't have its place. It absolutely does. However, birth is physiological. You're going to do it with or without help. And if you need that help, you can call it in. The aim of the empowered birth method is true natural birth, pull back as much as needed. So when you understand how birth physiology works and you understand that you need to feel safe, you can start to see how moms get tricked a lot of the time, because we've been taught to trust the experts over ourselves. We've been taught to go to the hospital, even though we don't feel safe there. We've been told that we have to call the midwife immediately when we go into labor instead of waiting until a little bit later on when we're having a home birth. And it's like, no, you need to have that monitoring the whole time. Well, no, actually you don't. Only if you really feel that it would help ease your mind is that appropriate. And that comfort level is different for everyone. So for myself, I discovered in my home birth that I can't have anybody in my space. I tried. I had the doula and I had the midwife there. And instead of being able to be in my body and follow the process, I felt very rushed. That's not their fault. That was my overlooking of my needs and my boundaries and thinking that I needed to bring them in early. Now that I have more of a higher perspective on it, I can see how going and looking on the outside did cause my labor to stall. I can also see that I didn't trust myself completely. And I also had the free birth, unassisted birth backup plan. I'd already had that backup plan. I just wasn't confident enough to use it until I was backed into the corner. And my midwife said, things aren't progressing. If you go back into labor and you call me, I'm going to have to reassess you. And if you are not far enough along, we will have to transfer you to the hospital. They'll want to break your waters. They'll want to run Pitocin. They'll want to get things going because you've been going in and out of labor and maybe there's a problem. And I could see that she was projecting a little bit of fear. And I'm like, that's not happening. So now you know about what the trap is. You understand how we don't see that trap coming as moms, especially. And now I want you to also understand the medical side of this, okay? So from the medical perspective, I mentioned earlier that they want to fill beds and empty beds. You also have to recognize that your medical professionals have only typically seen medicalized birth. In fact, the idea of dilating at 1 centimeter per hour came from Friedman's curve, which, guess what? Every single one of those patients had Pitocin. He was basing his study on his own clients in his own hospital. And then he also was like, oh, I'm going to run Pitocin and see how they dilate 1 centimeter per hour. And all of this then led to a overview where they're like, oh yeah, we'll just start paying attention to that for progression. You also have to understand that in the time that hospital birth was first established, this was a way of essentially having a conveyor belt system, is what it was. It was a response within the Industrial Revolution to the fact that women could no longer attend each other's births because they were now working in the factories. They were no longer in the cottage industry where if a birth was happening, they would drop everything and they'd go stay at the house for a few days of their friend or their family member. And instead, they were all cramped up in these apartments and then they were going to work. Even the children were going to work. Babies were also with the mothers. However, mothers were encouraged to wean them off as soon as possible, which is again why the invention of formula happened and where sleep training came from. So all of these things were in response to the Industrial Revolution. Yes, we have some amazing machinery and technology that came from that and huge advancements. And at the same time, it did take away a lot of maternal instinct. So we also didn't have as many midwives. And the reason for that is because before the Industrial Revolution, there was also a lot of witch hunts. So women were not allowed to gather in large groups. They couldn't pass on the wisdom anymore. And in addition to that, women who happened to have knowledge of our cycles and reproductive health were vilified as witches. The medical system had also basically said you can't practice without a license. So they turned birth into medicine. And by doing this over the course of centuries and in generations, we then started to lose the innate wisdom of how birth unfolds. You also have to recognize that men were the original doctors. They were not listening to the midwives who said, you know, labor takes as long as it takes. They're like, no, I think we can make it more efficient. And they did everything they could to make it more efficient. And a lot of those women died. A lot of those women did not make it. They had serious complications because of these tools. And that is how the doctors were able to refine those tools because they're like, oh, well, that one killed her. Well, we'll try the next one. So you need to recognize the context of how failure to progress became a thing. Now, in modern day, obviously, we're not experimenting on women at the same level. We do want moms to come out of their births unscathed. We do want babies to make it. At the same time, the underground root system that the foundation is built on still has that pervasive attitude that mom's body is broken and defective and needs to be managed. In addition to that, it is not a lucrative business model. It's not even sustainable as a business model to have every single mom who is having a birth in the hospital to be able to take as long as it takes, because we have a larger population. They need to get you in and out as fast as possible. That's just the way it is. Otherwise, you're taking up valuable resources by being there. And physiological birth is not able to be supported. It's not that they don't want to support it. It's that they actually do not have the resources available to help support it, because it's just not sustainable. It does not make any sense. So if you are going to have a true natural birth, you need to go into the hospital at the last possible minute or stay home. Those are the options. You go into the hospital when you need that additional support and help. If you want to have the extra monitoring, that's fine. And at the same time, you have to be aware of the fact that they need to fill beds and empty beds. So they are going to put you on that clock. There's no way around that. So now you understand where the medical system is really coming from. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that every single doctor and nurse and midwife is trying to push you through the system. There are a lot of midwives and doctors and nurses who are aware of what's going on, and they have been speaking out about it as loud as they possibly can without losing their license or getting in trouble with the system. At the same time, the profession does attract those people who are in it for the glory, for the money, for the prestige, for the power. I call those category 5s. Go check out my video inside of the Natural Birth Trap series on category 5s. It's in how the wrong doctor or nurse can basically derail your birth. So if you check out those traps, you will get the overview. I also have a birth advocacy report that goes into this inside of the Empowered Birth Toolkit and inside your Empowered Birth Workshop, so you can understand more deeply about this. So how do you get out of this trap then? And how do you avoid this trap? Well, I kind of already said it. You need to be aware of how physiological birth works. You need to be aware of where you feel safest to birth. If you are closing your eyes and imagining yourself in the hospital, and you know instinctively that you're going to feel really stressed out there, then the best place for you is at home. If, however, you imagine yourself at home and you can't feel comfortable there, then the next best thing for you is recognizing you need to be closer to the hospital. Whether that's getting an Airbnb, whether that is simply laboring somewhere else and then coming to the hospital earlier. However, still having a doula and somebody else to advocate for you in addition to the doula, your partner, training them up, being able to have that mindset, being aware of who you've hired as your care provider. That is going to help you. If you recognize the dangers of failure to progress, as the medical system has deemed this a problem, then you are more likely to have your backup plans. You'll know how to basically stay in your power when they tell you you're taking too long. Because birth is going to take as long as it takes. And as long as you feel safe and supported, your body will be able to do what it needs to do. If, however, you are tense and afraid, birth is going to take a lot longer, which is then going to lead to that failure to progress. You could even have labor completely shut down. I'm going to suggest that if you do not want to have a vaginal exam, that you also are very strong on that, because the second they know what your cervical dilation is, that is when they can start to impose those restrictions on you. If you are going in at the last minute, you don't tell them how long you've been in labor, because then they are going to be more like, oh, you've been in labor this long and you're still only here. So we're going to obviously assume that you can't birth. And it's not their fault. It's just the way that they have been trained. Okay. It's just the way that they've been trained. Very few care providers actually get to see a completely physiological birth inside of that environment. Unless they are attending home births, they're not going to see it. Unless they have given birth and had it take a long time and still done it unassisted or with the help of a midwife, but they did it mostly themselves, they're not going to see it. So you need to recognize where they're at, and you need to have protected yourself. So recognizing labor is going to take as long as it takes, and you need to have that mindset of not being in fear. The next thing you need to do is also have that education around the interventions that you may want to call in, and the education around physiological birth, so that you can also recognize, when am I going to call in that backup plan? Because otherwise, what's going to happen is that the medical system, whoever's on call, is going to be like, well, you're not progressing. Here are your options. And they give you options, but they may not be what you actually need. It's just protocol. And it doesn't make it bad or wrong. It just means that it may not be right for you. So do your research ahead of time. Next one, the right environment. You want to be able to also be like, okay, I need to recognize where I feel safest to labor and stay in that spot as long as possible. The more you feel safe, the more you're going to be able to open up. And recognize that if you are relocating from home to the hospital, give yourself a little bit more time, because you have now changed environments. Your body needs to adjust again. There are also some helpful tips inside of Natural Hospital Birth by Cynthia Gabriel about how you can preserve that environment, and recognize that the hospital is different from home. But the more that you're able to basically feel safe, and one of the best rules is, if you wouldn't have sex there to have a really good orgasm, you don't birth there. Okay, because it's all tied in. So, of course, not only the environment is important, but also the people that you've hired to support you. You need to have that care provider who's going to support you and not rush you through your birth. The best kind of care provider for a true natural birth is one who knows how to sit on their hands. Go check out some of my other videos where I talk about that. Again, the playlists for the Essential Tips series and the Natural Birth Traps will help you with that. So the last one is having the right support of your partner. Your partner needs to protect that space for you. They need to defend you, and they need to be able to keep you on track so that you're not like, this is taking forever, maybe I should give up. Because they can remind you of what you're doing this for. And they can also remind you that, hey, you could speed this up and it could get way more intense than it already is. Because that is one of the things with Pitocin or breaking your waters, is that you were managing your contractions just fine. Yeah, they were spaced out. And now they're one on top of each other and they are way more intense. And now you have back labor, and then you have that cascade of intervention on top of that. So always, always question the failure to progress label. So now you understand how to get out of the trap. Let's just also apply the empowered birth method to this, because when you are looking at this, I already kind of went through the 5 pillars of empowered birth. That's what those 5 things were: the mindset, the education, the environment, the facilitators, and the right support. There's deeper layers within that. So you need to get past your fear of failure to progress. You need to be able to recognize that this could be a very real possibility, that labor might take a lot longer than you thought it was going to take. And where are you going to put in those backup plans? The next thing, of course, is that once you've gotten past fear and you have your mindset strong, you need to bring your partner in. Your partner is your wild card. If they are not supportive, if they are doubting things and starting to defer to the care provider, the medical professionals in the room, then they are now against your plan, and that can derail it. Your partner's fear is just as detrimental as if you were afraid, because you can also pick up on that energy, and you need them on the outside feeling strong and powerful and confident. Imagine if for a minute you're in a fantasy world, okay? Now you are casting a very, very powerful, potent spell of protection. But before that spell of protection, with the creation that you're going to be bringing into the world, before you have that, your partner is fighting the dragon, okay? If your partner starts to get afraid and say, I don't know if I can fight this dragon, how focused are you going to be able to be on creating that spell of protection? You're not, right? So you need to recognize that your partner needs to have their mindset solid. And you can't train them if you are afraid, because they are going to bring every single one of their fears to you. If you tell them about failure to progress, but you haven't worked through and processed how you want to do this, they are going to bring up all of the what if scenarios and all of the horror stories they've heard. They may even try to shut it down. If you have a category 5 partner, then that is also going to be a little bit trickier. You have to do things differently. Again, if you want to know more about that, go check out my other video in the Natural Birth Trap series, because I do talk about partner support. So after you've done that, you are solid, your partner is solid. Now you bring in reinforcements. You can bring in a doula, absolutely. And you need to have the ability to advocate for yourself within the medical system, because sometimes doulas can't get there. Sometimes they don't have the ability to turn things around. If you and your partner are saying one thing and your doula knows that that's not right, but they are there to support you in whatever choice you may make a decision out of fear instead of power, and then it's not the doula's fault, because your doula is not there to run over your birth and say, hey, you have to do it this way and this way and that way. They don't want to do that to you. You are your own best expert. So your doula is there to reinforce what you want. And oftentimes, if you are afraid and deferring to the medical professional, then the doula is sitting there and watching you helplessly. They know what's coming, and there's nothing they can do about it, because you've already made up your mind, because you are afraid. You're making a decision out of fear. The other one is that you are strong in your mindset. However, then your partner starts to slowly chip away and derail things, and the doula, again, can't do anything. Your partner is now siding with the medical system. Your doula is saying it's not a good idea, and at the same time, you're not sleeping with your doula. You're not married to your doula. You're not the one raising the child with the doula. Your doula is an outsider, and your partner is the one that is closest to you. So your partner is really the wild card, which is why they need to be on board. And then you also need to be able to strongly advocate for yourself. That is why I have your Empowered Birth Academy, which I will talk more about when we go into those 3 paths. But essentially, to apply the Empowered Birth method, it's 3 steps. Get past your fear, help your partner get past theirs so they can be your solid rock, and advocate for yourself. Because the medical system, as I mentioned, has been based on this idea of profit, convenience, liability, and a lot of generational trauma and fear. The root system is affected, and they don't see it. Fish don't see the water that they swim in. And even if they do see it, they may not be able to do anything about it. The other thing is that you have to be the birth consumer. So this is part of the advocacy side. Being the birth consumer means that you are hiring a service. You are not a patient. You are a client. You need to get that mindset of patient out of your head because that is keeping you stuck. That is keeping you deferring to the experts. And with birth, you need to be your own expert because you are the one who is birthing this baby. The same thing goes for other aspects of your life too. I mean, all of these things that I talk about within the empowered birth method is also applied to other areas of motherhood. This is the same thing with getting relationship advice. You know your partner better than anybody else. And sometimes the advice that they give for marriage doesn't work for certain partners. For one thing, you don't want to go for counseling with a category 5, not couples counseling anyway. You do want to go for yourself. Let me just be clear. The other one, of course, is building a business. If you're trying to build a business by somebody else's roadmap and you're not following your intuition, then that can lead you down a dark path as well. So within the empowered birth method, what I really want you to understand is that you are your own best expert. You call in the reinforcements you need. You get the education you need. You create your backup plans. And you also have those people who can support you at the level that you need them to support you at. Nobody is going to dictate to you when you are failing to progress. You get to decide that on your own. You get to decide when you call in reinforcements. And you can't do that if you're still afraid. So again, the most important thing is getting past fear. That is why inside of your Empowered Birth Academy and your Empowered Birth Workshop, I have a module, and it's usually the first one, on how to get past fear. I also teach a lot about physiological birth, and I weave that into all of my teachings. I also teach about the psychology that you really need to understand so that you are not getting tricked out of things that you want by a system that is not really seeing what they're doing as harmful because they have been taught that it saves lives. So, sometimes people think that they're being the hero when really they're being the villain. And that is why I want you to know you are your own best expert. So how do you become your own best expert, especially when there's a lot of mainstream birth advice out there? Well, that is where the empowered birth method comes in, and that's where the 3 paths come in. So I mentioned at the beginning of this video that information is free and I only charge for access to me. And I mean it. Whether you get any of my courses or get my book, or whether you work with me at the deeper levels, I want you to have an empowered birth. Every birth can and should be a beautiful and empowering experience. You are not disposable. And when you have an empowered birth, you're an empowered mom for life. No one can take your power away from you again. So I have 3 paths to empowered birth. And if you've already heard about this before, then you can skip ahead to the recap section with the big takeaways and extra little tips. However, if you are new to me, then you're going to want to pay attention to this part because I'm going to tell you about the entry level points for each one. And I'm also going to tell you how to get the most out of this. There's also an overview that you can check out if you go to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide, because I do have those 3 paths. So number 1 is the do-it-yourself path, which you are currently on, okay? So what that means is that you can watch any one of these master classes. You can go and take any of the mini guides that are on my website. You can go and check out all of the little freebies on all of the social media channels, and you can piece together your own map. Essentially, you're building your own course for your own needs and values. And then if you want to go to the deepest level of do-it-yourself, then the entry level point for that is to join the community newsletter. This will give you access to the Empowered Mom Toolkit, which gives you both Empowered Birth Wisdom and Empowered Mom Magic. Those are 2 different folders, and I put little chapters of my book in there. I put workbooks in there. I sometimes put free mini courses in there. It's essentially a miniature library of resources that will help you on your empowered birth and empowered mom journey. The reason I do this, of course, is because I don't work with everyone at that deeper level, and not everybody is going to go through a course. Maybe you only need 1 or 2 pieces. At the same time, The toolkit comes with the weekly newsletter. So every single week, I have a deep dive newsletter, and you can skim the headlines, you can skim the bold text, you can dive deeper and get some of the embedded links within each section. And the main sections are the introduction, which is what came up this week, what the theme is, what's coming in the newsletter itself. Then the middle, the juicy middle, I call it, is what was created. So I will tell you about the next masterclass and give you the link to that. I will tell you about what's coming up in the community. Maybe I have a program that I'm running. Maybe somebody else in my Empowered Mom Circle has a program that I'm giving you access to check out. Maybe it's that I did a little freestyle thing on one of my other channels and I want you to check that out. Maybe it's news about my book. Like, this juicy middle changes every single week, depending on what has been created. And then after that, we have the Empowered Birth Wisdom, where I take a little piece of my Empowered Birth method or answer a question, and I put it through the theme and tell you more of that magic. Sometimes there's deeper insights that just came to me over the course of the week, and I'm like, oh, this is another piece of that Empowered Birth Wisdom, and you get it first. Then after that, I tell you more about the 3 paths. So there's a little middle segment. You can skip over that if you're familiar, and that changes and updates and lets you know when we have live classes available, when we have another program available, and if there are any changes to the do-it-yourself or self-study VIP. And then finally, what we have is the Empowered Mom Magic. And Empowered Mom Magic, as I mentioned like earlier, Empowered Birth Method also translates to other areas of your life as a mom. So birthing a business, birthing a new version of yourself, getting out of a relationship that's not serving you, or making your relationship better. There's just so much that I found within birth that is a metaphor for life. So I take that same wisdom and then I apply it in a different spot. And then that's essentially the newsletter every single week. As a member of the community, you can also hit reply to any one of those newsletters and you get more support. We will basically respond to your email within 1 to 2 business days. We don't work on Friday though. So recognizing is like you get more premium access to us that way. The next level after that is self-study. So we have free self-study in our challenges that you can find on YouTube. If you go into the playlist on the YouTube channel, you will find some of the best courses that I've already put out. There are 2 that I would suggest you go through immediately, especially if you are new to me and you're serious about the Empowered Birth Method and serious about avoiding a C-section. The first is Reset Your Mindset for Empowered Birth. It's a mini challenge. And the next is Write Your Empowered Birth Plan. So those 2 programs, the little courses, the challenges, will help you get started on your empowered birth journey. And then in addition to that, we also have your Empowered Birth Workshop, which again is free. However, this course is a lot more dense. So you have the option of upgrading to our last section of self-study, which is self-study VIP. This is where our denser programs live, and you're not paying for information. You're paying for direct access to me and my team to help walk you through the program. To be like, oh yeah, you don't need that module because you already understand that level. So you can skip that one so that you can go through the courses faster. You don't have to take everything in because I do put a lot in there. And at the same time, when you graduate from the core programs, you can often get another call that is focused on, okay, you've done your homework, you've done all the basic stuff. Let's make sure that you get what you need. Let's make sure that you have that empowered birth. Let's make sure that you haven't left anything out. I look over birth plans. I look over like workbooks. I look over what you have learned and gained. And that's something you've paid for. Because path number 3, premium coaching, I don't work with everyone who comes to me. Okay. So my live classes, when I run them, my live coaching, when I do it, is focused for those moms who need it most, who are willing to invest in themselves at a higher level, who are determined to get the empowered birth experience that they want, who also want to transcend just birth and have a more empowered motherhood experience because everything ties in, and who ultimately are going to be able to become those powerful case stories that then ripple out and allow for more insight into what I can teach later. Every single one of my clients has taught me something. And because they've been able to teach me something about birth and how the method applies in different situations, I can then put that inside of these deep dive masterclasses, and then the rest of the population benefits. So moms get that information. The story of Jenny's birth wouldn't be out there if I hadn't been coaching her directly. And back in 2020 and 2021, she was working with me directly. Same with Rebecca, same with Lisa. Every single mom that has come into my community at the deepest level has given me those deeper insights. Claire Sherman is another one. So if you're curious about that, you can always go into the playlists on the YouTube channel, check out some of those interviews. There are also 2 interviews inside of the Start Guide. But ultimately, what I want you to know is that whatever level you're at in your empowered birth journey, you are supported here. Some go this way, some go that way, but always are the queen's way, and you are the empowered birth queen. So the key is investing in yourself, either your time, your money, whatever it is that is going to help you. I want you to have those paths. And so I've basically laid this out so that you can have an empowered birth, even if you never work with me at the deeper level. And if you want the faster track, if you want to invest in yourself at a higher level, those paths are open for you. There are entry points. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Okay, so now you know a little bit more about the 3 paths. You had the overview of the cesarean trap, of the failure to progress. Let's quickly recap on what we learned and get some deeper insights. So the way that this trap shows up essentially is they say that your labor is taking too long and therefore the baby is definitely not coming out. So we might as well do a C-section. Unfortunately, that is based off of data that is not basing on physiological birth, but instead on a medical model of birth that was created in the Industrial Revolution, that was essentially men thinking, I can make this go more efficient. And they did a lot of experiments on women. They invented the forceps, and they recognized that birth could be a very lucrative industry that would keep the hospitals running. So to understand more about that, I would suggest checking out Rachel Reed's book, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, because that will go deeper into what you really need to understand in the context. It's very important to understand context and psychology as you're planning your birth and wondering, well, why did they say it that way? Why is it that so many people are getting tripped up? And this is the thing, is I started asking those questions. Why? So I even mentioned inside of my book, Your Empowered Birth, that they teach you what to think, but not how to think about it. And so I'm really aiming to teach you how to think. And so if you do want to have extra support with this, you can always leave a comment and I will check those out. I do read every single comment. I will answer. I will give you more insights. I'm happy to do that. If you also want to have a back and forth conversation with me, that is either within a course or a class that I have running, or maybe it's that we are doing a coaching session. And the first level entry is to basically apply for a laser coaching session. You have to do the work in order to get on my calendar, okay? I don't have a calendar link posted. It's essentially, you need to email me. So hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com. There is also an intake form if you check the description of this video, and that will allow you to get in and see if this would work for you. If it's not aligned, if I don't have the time available, or if I'm like, you know what, you would probably just benefit from reading this article. And then if you have any questions about that, you can always send me an email, because energy is precious. And I really want you to understand that the highest level value is your time and your energy and your money. So I want you to invest only in things that call to you. And I want you to invest in things that are actually going to help support your dreams and your empowered birth. Okay? So that is why information is free. I charge for access to me. That is why if you have any questions, you just reach out. Understanding that with failure to progress, it really comes down to failure to wait. That's the biggest takeaway I could give you, is that it's just failure to wait. And the more you understand physiological birth, the less afraid you are, the less tense you are, the safer your environment is, the less likely you're going to get that label of failure to progress. And intuitively, you'll know whether you need to call in that reinforcement or not. But having the medical system dictate how long you're allowed to stay in labor is all about their own fears. It's also about profit. It's about the fact that they need to fill beds and empty beds. So if you're not progressing in labor and you're still feeling fine and you've gone to the hospital, maybe even booked in, maybe you admitted yourself and you're like, you know what? You're right. It's failure to progress. I'm going home. That is an option. You can do that. Or you have the midwife at the house and it's like, okay, labor shut down. I'm failing to progress. I'll send the midwife away. They can always come back. And if you are also confident that you could birth on your own, then it won't be so scary for you to do that. Okay? So that's pretty much all I have for you today. If you have any questions, again, you can put it inside the comments, or you can reach out to me and my team, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to go deeper with this. As I said, I only do these as an overview. I want to make sure that it's not too dense. And I can also go way deeper on this. I can give you all of the resources. I can give you all of the nuances. Check the transcript, because if that's available, there may already be resources embedded in there, references, sources. I have thousands of resources. So, I mean, all I have to do is pull from my giant library that I'm constantly adding to. And at the same time, I don't need to dump all of that on you, because you're still at the level of just give me the overview. Okay? So now you know the paths, you know what empowered birth entails, you know about failure to progress, you know that it's a huge cesarean trap. And next week, what we're going to be talking about is not dilating, because that can be another cesarean trap. So thank you so much for watching. Have a happy empowered birth journey, whether you're birthing a baby, birthing a business or a creative project or a movement, or rebirthing a new version of yourself. Empowering Moms is here for you. And I will see you next week. Namaste.